that these attacks on Iran aren't about stopping the nuclear program, whatever that may be, but it's about regime change in Iran. For
Yeah,
people who doubt that, could you elaborate more on that, why you said that?
because of the nature of the Israeli strike in the beginning, that they're attempting to grind down the leadership by killing them, because of Netanyahu's language about Iran, because of and ultimately it all goes back to the sort of the logic of Zionism, the destabilizing logic of Zionism. Israel cannot allow any country to exist in the region that resists its project, its settler colonial project of occupation and the maintenance of an ethno supremacist state at the expense of the Palestinians. And so they've been working to, starting on October 7th, they've been working to destroy every member of the axis of resistance until they get to Iran, which they consider the base of resistance. And the resistance comes from the Islamic Revolution of 1979, when Iranians decided they were not going to be allied with Israel and the United States anymore. And they were going to adopt the slogan of freedom, independence, and Islam, which comes with solidarity with the Palestinians. Iran, with its powerful military, but also its base of its deep wellspring of social solidarity, political solidarity with the Palestinians, has to be destroyed in order to maintain a Jewish supremacist state on the backs of Palestinians. And if Iran were to theoretically develop a nuclear weapon, what would be the consequences for Israel? Iran would not immediately seek to attack and destroy Israel. There's nothing indicating that they would do something like that, that would potentially sacrifice their own stability, put them under an existential threat like the one they're facing now. What they would do is they would use that nuclear weapon to establish a protective umbrella for the oppressed people of the region, from Yemen to Palestine to Iraq to Lebanon. And Israel would find it difficult to continue occupying these people and terrorizing these people without facing a real existential threat itself, which would then lead to the demographic demise of the Jewish Israeli public. A brain drain, large parts of segments of the Israeli public would begin to leave, and the settler movement itself would become suffocated and would turn internally on the part of the Israeli public that opposes it. This is the kind of dynamic that would, the contradictions of Zionism would explode into the open if Iran obtained a nuclear weapon, which is why Israel cannot allow Iran to be a latent nuclear power. But in order to prevent Iran from having a nuclear program, Israel needs to enact regime change, because there is simply no Iranian government under the current circumstances that would give up its civilian nuclear program. That's something that became abundantly clear to me after I visited the civilian nuclear reactor in Tehran and talked to people associated with loosely associated with the program.
Yeah, and if regime change in Iran were to happen, or attempted regime change in Iran were to happen, that just incentivizes Iran even more to have a nuclear weapon. If the goal is for Iran not to have a nuclear weapon, the way to do that is through diplomacy and negotiation. They have to do it voluntarily, not by force.
I mean, I can tell you just from talking to Iranian diplomats, like high level diplomats, they are eager to make a deal. They are willing to make sacrifices in their program in exchange for sanctions relief, and being out in the streets in Iran, being in private homes, interacting. I interacted with a very diverse array of Iranians from across social strata with different perspectives, and all of them are suffering under sanctions. They all want sanctions relief. So Iranian leadership wants this deal. They don't want to develop a nuclear weapon and go to the brink. And there is a fatwa issued by Ayatollah Ali Khamenei against against developing a nuclear weapon that's still currently in effect. But we also have to remember Iran has a civilian nuclear program. It's being used to develop medical products, including radioisotopes that treat 1 million Iranians. They're under sanctions, so they can't import these kinds of goods. For example, if you've ever had cancer, you've been treated for cancer, and you need to get tested, you get a PET scan. That's the most reliable way of detecting cancer. Iran's doing that through its nuclear program. It's treating agricultural products through its nuclear program to prevent infestation from insects. It's using it to disinfect medical devices. It is also seeking to develop and diversify its electrical grid, its power supply, because they've been having, blackouts every day for an hour or two. Its population's growing rapidly. And the nuclear program makes them a regional power that can export technology. They're training thousands and thousands of nuclear scientists. It's part of their national identity and pride, but it didn't begin under the Islamic Republic or after the Islamic Revolution. It actually began first with the Atoms for Peace program, which was launched by President Dwight D. Eisenhower in the US, which gave nuclear know-how and technology to the government or monarchy of Shah Reza Pahlavi. And Shah Reza Pahlavi was the one who developed the nuclear reactor I visited in Tehran with American and French assistance. After the Islamic Republic came into being, the Americans and French quit and they had to turn to Russia for assistance. And now they're mining uranium domestically, and they're able to do this all domestically under sanctions. They're not going to give it up. They're just simply not going to give it up. But what they are going to do is they are going to abide by their obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty to not produce a nuclear weapon. They would do that. But what the US has been demanding since negotiations began is no enrichment at all, that they just blow up all of these facilities they've been building that even the Shah wanted to develop. And that is a step towards capitulation. And when you give an inch, this is much more than an inch, but when you give much more, if you when you give an inch to the Zionist axis of Israel and the US, they're going to take a mile. As we saw with Muammar Gaddafi, who gave up his non-conventional weapons, his sources of deterrence, in a deal with negotiated by one of the biggest reptilian shape-shifting sleazeballs on the planet, Tony Blair. And what did they do to Muammar Gaddafi? Destroyed him, launched a completely, basically unprovoked regime change war that led to him being sodomized to death with a bayonet by Al Qaeda mercenaries operating under NATO air cover. Uh, in contrast, the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, developed nuclear weapons, developed a ballistic missile system to deliver them, and got love letters from Donald Trump. And Donald Trump walking across the demilitarized zone to meet him to discuss a deal. So that's the lesson for the world. And Iran, at the very least, is going to insist on nuclear rights under international law.